Welcome to our political party, a chance for our guests to speak their minds in a whole range of topics. Let's see who's on the guest list. Lizza is a Washington correspondent for The New Yorker magazine. Julia Reed writes for Newsweek and is the author of The House on First Street about her life in New Orleans.
And Errol Louis is a columnist at the New York Daily News and a good friend of our show. Welcome, everybody. This Saturday in Dallas, a new exhibit opens of the George W. Bush memorabilia. And included in that is Saddam Hussein's pistol and the bullhorn that President Bush used at Ground Zero. What memorabilia would you like to see in the museum?
First of all, President Bush has a museum. Has anyone told Dick Cheney that this is the first presidential? All right, this is silly, but I want to see that pretzel that he inhaled in 2002 and passed out when he was watching the Super Bowl or something. That's what I want to see.
And he fell over. I forgot about that.
And that was upstairs in the residence,
It's either got to be at the Smithsonian or this museum. Yes, yes. Supposedly there are a lot of conspiracies.
And pretzels like that, they survive.
Well, yes.
I'm not so sure it'd be a pretty thing to look at, frankly, Ryan.
That's true.
The concept is good. In actuality, I don't know.
The presidential petrified pretzel. Okay, Julia.
Now, I want to see a perishable item, too, actually.
His whole museum may be perishable.
God, this is sort of sentimental, but I mean, the first time I ever interviewed Bush before he became president, when he was still, he was about to run, and he was still governor of Texas, and he was smoking a cigar during our interview on the grounds of and his biggest concern in those days, which, you know, they got a little bit bigger, was please don't write that I'm smoking a cigar. So, I mean, but there was such an innocent time. He was in a festive little mood. Condi Rice had just given him a tutorial before I got there. You know, no Dick Cheney hadn't been appointed vice president yet. I mean,
President. Whoa, he appointed president.
And he, you know, 9/11 hadn't happened. There was no Iraq. There was no Afghanistan. It was sort of, you know,
This
I looked at it
before
on that very nostalgic.
Julia, did you write it then? I mean, you're telling it on national television now.
I didn't write it then, but I mean, hell, the
Now it's
statute of
out.
limitations has run
So
out.
we can have a whole museum on presidential cigars, right?
Yeah.
I'd love to see the notes from Condi Rice's briefing to him.
I know, that was actually, that was when, you know, he was, like I said, doing the tutorials, and his body language with her was so relaxed. I mean, he had just finished a run, and they were having a salad out there on this wrought iron table and stuff, and she had on this really tight, short mini skirt, and they were kind of sprawled out, and I thought, good, well, at least they've got a good rapport. Anyway, so.
That chemistry is everything.
Yes. Didn't work out so well, but anyway.
When I go to the museum, I will be looking for some hanging chads. I'm sure there's enough of them out there, and they can sort of, you know, you can sort of show people how an election was lost, won, or stolen. Take your pick. Based on stuff that was kind of pushed through and kind of not pushed through. And after all, we didn't really ever get a chance to sort of count them. So you could actually have the visitors do the count that the Supreme Court stopped.
That's a great one. Where are those ballots right now?
I assume.
The Smithsonian.
I'm pretty sure
I
they're
have
not
one
gonna
on
be
my
announced.
bookcase.
For real?
Yeah, I covered that. I covered the recount, and you know,
you literally got
they had
one.
sample ballots for all the reporters so you would understand what these ballots are about. The original ones, I don't know.
I mean, somebody someday could go back in there and actually do a count.
That's true. Well, the newspapers
They did
do
that.
Remember that?
Yeah, that was, oh my goodness, let's
You know,
not
they
go
sold
back.
these machines. You can buy them on eBay now, and, you know. But I'm guessing the way that the George W. Bush Library deals with the recount is sort of how the Nixon Library deals with Watergate. You know, there'll be something on it, but it's not really going to be...
Something very euphemistic,
It's not going to be front and center. It's not going to be a place to go to get the full story.
It was amazing how quickly the issue of legitimacy dropped off in our political conversation. Nobody raised it once he was in there. He was
Well, that
president.
would have been too dangerous. I mean, no, I don't think anybody pro or con, you know, on either side wants to have that conversation dangling.
And this may be heretical. Al Gore deserves a lot of respect for that. He put a stop to all that conversation.
I don't think that's heretical. I think you're right.
Yeah, but you know, I think there was a period after the election where there were still quite a few folks who were not viewing him as legitimate. I'll never forget the first conversation I had. I was covering the White House at the time. After 9/11, the first conversation I had with a Bush advisor was, the first thing out of his mouth was, well, one thing 9/11 does is it puts to rest this legitimacy question.
Which is true, but I think...
So I thought it was like, this is the day after. You know.
Yeah, but y'all, there were several news organizations went back into Florida and did recounts in some of the disputed areas. They didn't do the whole state, obviously, but in every case, it came out that Bush had won those areas. So
Yeah, I know, we forget that.
yeah, we do forget that.
All right, we're not
That's
gonna
a
get
longer
into this.
conversation,
We're
but
not gonna
those results were more complicated
All
than
right.
that.
It's all
Look,
complicated, but I think we have to...
Americans don't want that hanging out there. I mean, you might have, you know, you're in Washington, but out there in like regular America, there was.
Wait,
I mean,
Washington is not
Regular America, okay.
Relax, like,
All right, look, ours isn't the only political party around. The Koch brothers, the billionaire businessmen behind a whole lot of conservative organizations, are throwing a party to talk about, quote, the most severe threats facing our free society. Some people would put them on that list. But anyway, if you were invited, what would you say is the biggest threat? Julia?
the incredible debt that we've gotten ourselves in. I mean, you know, if we don't get a handle on this soon, I mean, I can't imagine what's going to happen to us. I mean, we've got to do all the things
That's our
we
kids'
love.
problem.
Yeah, well,
It's your
Come on.
yeah, I know. I mean, that's what we've been saying. I think the American people have finally grasped how incredibly dangerous this is and what a threat it is, but I'm not sure we have the leadership to deal with it yet.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, people are sitting around their kitchen tables now, not out of choice. They have no place to go.
But the question is, I mean, we don't have the leadership to deal with it yet. The question is, if we do, will people actually be willing to take the hit? You know, I mean, are they going to be like in France? You know, whoa, I got to work till I'm 62.
Errol, what's your...
I would, in fact, say that it is the anonymous corporate money that's flowing into elections through innocent-sounding shell groups started by people like the Koch brothers. And I wouldn't bring this up until after dessert, not only because I wouldn't want to ruin the
Over
party,
brandy or something.
but because it would probably be the last you heard of me at that party. But I think it's an incredibly serious thing that you've got thousands and thousands of ads that are running and nobody knows where it's coming from. And I think the game was really exposed just earlier this week when we finally saw the corporate anonymous funder who somehow paid for an ad telling people not to vote. I mean, that's as bad as it gets. And if you multiply that by 100 times, which is entirely possible at this point, I think you start to see a real serious threat to the basic operations of democracy.
Were you as threatened by George Soros as you are by the Koch brothers?
Well, you know, George Soros is a, well, first of all, you can find out where he's given money to. He writes a letter saying, I'm giving money here. He doesn't start little groups that have some sort of fictitious name to it. I mean, it's a big, big difference.
The issue of anonymity is not one side or the other. It's just a theoretical problem. And I'm with Errol. Anonymity is the problem. I'm not bothered so much by the amount of political conversation. In fact, more the better. It's the anonymity that really does.
And I'm not bothered by the amount of money. Are you? I mean, that's when we were talking about Stuart Mott before the camera started rolling. He gave Nixon $1 million in '72, and then he gave McGovern $1 million, and then Clem Stone gave Nixon $1 million. I mean, there's plenty of money to go around on both sides. But I'd rather just know that. I mean, I'd rather this guy give $1 million than funnel it through these things that you are. So I agree with you.
The deficit, as important a problem as that is, and as important a problem as it is to have transparency in our fundraising system, in the unlikely event that I went to this party, I think I would just reject the premise. Neither of these are great threats to our freedom, and they always use this overheaded rhetoric that that our freedom is being threatened. I frankly don't see our freedoms really being threatened in this country. We have tremendous problems like the deficit, like the campaign issue. Yeah. But I don't see these guys use this overheated rhetoric that Obama is threatening our freedom. Whose freedom is being threatened?
What I talked about and what Julia talked about is this problem of the slowly boiling pot, right? I mean, you put the frog in the slowly boiling pot, and it gets a little hotter, and by the time it's reached a fatal level, it's too late.
Freedom is being threatened by having too much money or anonymous money in an election?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Whose?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, if freedom is stolen in only one congressional district, that's a problem, you know? And I think that could happen in this election cycle less than 2 weeks from today.
I don't see even anonymous people.
I'm going to say something which is, again, a bit off. I think at some levels we are more free now than we've ever been. The technology that is out there, the ability to speak through, without the big media companies, from one person to the next, email, Gmail, all this twitting and whatever. That is the Twitter. I don't know these words. I don't do it. But yeah, tweeting, that's right. But you know what? We are freer than we've ever been, other than the fact that technology also is invasive. Yeah. So I think that is where freedom is at the fulcrum, rather than deficit's a big problem at a different level.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about freedom being threatened, that's one thing. I'm just talking about, you know, what I think, you know, threatened society in general, but not...
Yeah, no, I think it's important to draw a distinction.
If you're narrowing it down, you're
between what these guys talk about.
All right, freedom lovers, we have to take a quick break, but we want to hear from you. Check out our blog at cnn.com/Parker Spitzer and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.